Welcome to the event and welcome to Princeton Theological Seminary. We really appreciate our new venue. This is very nice, and rumors of the seminary's demolition have been greatly exaggerated. Here we are. So my name is Rich Ryan. My job here today is to keep the talk to a minimum, but our job here is simply to listen and to help elevate our discussion of mobility and circulation. Learn a little bit of the rewriting of the community master plan, as we know, is underway. Some of you who were at the meeting on Thursday of the steering committee heard some early reports from the visioning survey that they just completed. And real quick, what do you like most about living in Princeton? Number one, ability to walk destinations. What do you find most challenging about living in Princeton? Well, number one was the high cost of living, but number two, traffic congestion. What are the top issues the master plan should address? Number one, improving safety for pedestrians and cyclists. And when you think of new development, what concerns and opportunities come to mind? Traffic, parking, congestion, circulation, the number one answer. So we've got some excellent timing here. I'd like to just quickly introduce other members of Princeton Future who are in the room. We have Sheldon Sturgis, our executive director, Catherine Kish. Is that back there someplace? Yep, there she is. And Emma Bergo. Hi, Emma. And Tony Nelson. We'll hear from very soon. I also want to just mention two. Marina. Oh my gosh. I knew I was missing somebody. Thank you. Marina, it's just such a huge crowd. I apologize.
Good morning, everyone. This morning we are going to talk about and do a workshop that is dealing primarily with mobility and circulation as it impacts the town of Princeton. There have been many professional studies that have been done over the years for Princeton, but today we want to allow people, you all here, to show us where and how you think mobility circulation would occur in and around the city, in our town, in Princeton here, for the next foreseeable future. I fundamentally believe in the 400 workshops that I have done over a time, that no one knows a community better than those who live and work here and who care about this community and are really concerned about its future. And that has been demonstrated most recently in the last workshop we did, which was called Susceptibility to Change, where a relatively large group of people met at the library and worked on a series of 7 maps that had specific areas of the town. And we asked them to determine what areas would be highly susceptible to change in the future. Not highly susceptible to development, but highly susceptible to change, which means something different would occur than what is there now. And we asked them to do that based on high susceptibility to change and moderate susceptibility to change. And we also used low and no change. The thing that was interesting about it is after we looked at all the maps, very few people put actually the green, no change, or the yellow, perhaps some change. Almost everybody focused on the red, highly susceptible to change, and the orange, moderately susceptible to change. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is within the context of that susceptibility to change, where we would put and locate future transit facilities and stops, and how much of the town would actually be covered by that. By that I mean how many people could walk within a 5-minute walking distance to an actual transit stop of some kind. Now, obviously, town planning is really the framework on which all development is related, and streets are the kind of the fundamental infrastructure. I believe they are our most important public spaces, and upon which all mobility obviously runs, and along which all land uses are located. So it becomes extraordinarily important that we understand where and how future development is actually going to occur and what that transportation system is going to be. But it's really clear that it needs to be multimodal. There needs to be a multimodal master plan, which really enhances this future. And as this begins to become more finalized and implemented, we need in this town a new zoning code which will allow it to be built. So many separate studies have been done, but what I'm suggesting is that we really need to have a holistic overlay of all the available networks which are out there. Now, for today's workshop, you have on your tables a high-resolution photograph of the town with all of the street names on it. You have two number 2 pencils. You have a set of colored markers. You have a circle template, both a negative and positive circle template, which demonstrates the 5-minute walking distance to a point. And there will be a series of tracing paper overlays on which your information will be transformed. Now, just to orient you to the base map here, you can see here the university. You can see Nassau Street, North Harrison, and Witherspoon are on here. And one of the first things that we want to do is to kind of organize or orient people to the actual map itself. So, but through the course of this workshop, we are going to ask you 11 questions which need to have a graphic response. And I assume that that once we ask the question and you can talk among the group of people who are at your table, we would really like then to have you all agree and to actually graphically transpose your answers directly to the map. And once that's complete, at the end of this particular workshop, we will synthesize all this into a series of individual graphic notations, which we will then present back in a presentation called Did We Get It Right? Now, the agenda for today is going to be both the introduction and determining, where you live. Then we're going to probe traffic speed, congestion, and potential locations for traffic circles. Following that will be a discussion on where we should have transit loops, where future stops should be located, and what are appropriate walking distances to connect. The next part of it is going to be the pedestrian network, which is our trails and paths. And one of the things we would like to probe is whether or not Witherspoon Street is appropriate as a green spine. Following that, we will probe the idea of what should be the primary bike network here in town. Following that will be a exercise on-demand transit and stops. That is any area that is beyond the walking distance of the transit loop that we'll study and discuss early on. How do we serve the rest of the town by transit? And I want to probe the whole idea of the on-demand transit, which has been proven in so many other places. And then the last part of the workshop will be where would you locate potential mixed-use parking locations? These would be buildings which would be built and would be able to be converted at some point in the future from its parking use to some other use, whether that's housing or offices or agriculture. That would be unclear. And then absolutely the last part of it, which would probably be the most interesting, is to go from group to group to group here, and I think we have 10 groups, to present your findings in terms of your concepts. Now, the first thing I would like to do, and this is question number 1 of the 11 questions, on the aerial photograph, just use the pencil and mark with a small square the location of where you live or where you have your business. That would be the first part of the exercise that I would like us to do. The second part of it is after you finish that, the question that we're kind of wondering about, obviously, is that currently Princeton is primarily auto dependent, and it has insufficient local parking, although many people think that we have more than enough parking, but it depends upon where it is. An early transportation study, 2014, had a couple of interesting quotes that it is not yet feasible to limit car dependency in parking. 180,000 plus motor vehicle trips pass through our streets, and there is a desire for less car-oriented downtown. And these are all issues that we will tackle and we'll discuss and we'll graphically notate during the course of this particular workshop. After you all have finished notating where you live or where your business is on the map, the next thing we really, the first thing is probably the primary thing, is dealing with cars and parking. Unfortunately, current conditions in downtown Princeton are currently primarily dependent upon cars and insufficient local parking. And it is really not yet feasible to limit car dependency in parking because we have no transit system or a complete transit system in place. And right now, about 180,000 plus cars pass through our streets. But nonetheless, there is this desire for less car-oriented downtown, and this all came from the 2014 Traffic and Transportation Committee. Now, it's clear that Americans have been dependent upon the automobile now for, almost 100 years or more than 100 years. But the outstanding, unbelievable fact that the majority of these 5-passenger or 6-passenger cars are only carrying one person, and every one of those cars, if they come to downtown, needs to park someplace. Now, when I started driving, gasoline was 25 cents a gallon, and now right at the recent height, it reached a little bit over $5 a gallon, and higher in other portions of the country. So question number 2 and 3 are important as starting points, and that is using a black marker. Where do you think there's excessive speed and noise? And just portray that as a dashed line. Once you complete that, question number 3 is, again using the black marker, put an X to those intersections that you think have the most traffic congestion. And this will give us a fairly good idea of the sections of streets and the intersections that should be focused on at some point in the future. The next one, in terms of that overlay, would, again, using the black marker, it would be interesting to know, given the fact that Princeton has now built several of these traffic circles, using the black marker and a small circle, where would you locate any new traffic circles? Where do you think they would be located here in town?
Now we're moving on to the next one, and you can put your black marker away because you won't use that one anymore. I want to talk about transit opportunities. And, the transportation, the 14 Transportation Committee, Traffic and Transportation Committee, provide more public and private transit options. And you heard Rich going, it's the top 3 things that the master plan wants to do with. But I thought there was another interesting statistic here. Nearly 13,000 people are candidates for expanded local transit. And I went, wow, so the Princeton's got 31,000 some people. So this would be 13,000. The question is, that would be the minimum. Could we actually do more than that? So here is going to be a question for you. And these are just a bunch of suppositions. There are going to be more cars, and there are going to be more electric cars, and there's going to be more parking demand. I mean, that we know. Additional transit options, if we install additional transit options, there's going to be less parking. If we create greater pedestrian priority, there's going to be less. I mean, just myself as an example. I used to have 2 cars. I live on Bank Street. I just sold them. I donate. So I walked here this morning. And what you have one car, it forced you because my wife is doing photography down the shore. So it was great. Now, bicycle utilization, less traffic and parking. On-demand transit, this is a whole additional concept that I want to introduce you guys to today. Less traffic and parking. But the key is that there must be multimodal options for everybody in order to do it. Now, here's an interesting one. Here's the local New Jersey bus lines and stops. Now, the basic circle template that you have on there is the basic notion of transit. People will walk 5 minutes. Beyond those 5 minutes, it's generally understood they will automatically default to a car or a scooter or anything else, but they won't walk. So that 5 minutes is fundamentally the DNA. We call it the basic DNA of planning. Now, if you look at this map, and the two big orange circles are the Dinky Station and Princeton Junction Station, can you tell me in your own mind where the lines actually go and what they connect to? You can't do it. Now, it even gets to be more complicated. This one is a very interesting map, beautifully graphically done. This is the Princeton bus system. And you notice very little expands into the town. And in fact, you can stop at Wegmans and Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, but you can't go to McCaffrey's.
I think they changed that, didn't they?
This is the latest one that I got. Came directly off of their website. But you can see it goes up to Nassau Street and comes back. Now, if you could say, if I could say to you, follow around the yellow line, could you do it? Could you remember where it is? Or could you remember where the purple line is or the blue line is? That's all you know is Washington Street has got lots of buses on it. Now, here's something that is, they have an incredible fleet of buses and they're going to go electric. I mean, the university is just doing some remarkable things in terms of transportation. Of that, there is absolutely no doubt. But it just ignores the rest of the town for all practical purposes. Now, here's something that, and I think you all know this one, should be pretty straightforward. The big question for me is, why are there so many empty buses? They're all empty.
Yeah.
All of these buses are going through town, and they're all empty. 54 passenger bus with a driver. And it's not just the university buses. It's almost all the buses. School buses, big buses, little buses. The only one that seems to be somewhat successful is the New Jersey Transit bus. That one has more capacity than most of the other. So my question, as I sat there and been sitting there all this time going like, wouldn't it be incredible if there could be a coordinated concentration of these underutilized buses for the benefit of the entire town? Wouldn't that be absolutely incredible? Now, if you look at what we have available, we have the Dinky upgrade, that's hot, right? We have the university buses, we have DOT buses, we have school buses, we have on-demand transit, we got taxis, and we got Ubers. Now, what we need is somebody to coordinate all of that stuff. Now, that's part of today's workshop, to see how all of this stuff may overlay on each other to actually create a holistic network. That's all I want to do. Is I would really like to see it in the future. We'd like to see what that network is. I mean, but only if. Now, this is the big controversy, obviously, in town now. I mean, the people want to go. They want to save the Dinky. Well, I'll tell you, I took the Dinky to go to a lecture at Rutgers last week, and I took the Dinky back and forth. And when I was in Princeton Junction Station, they said, "All aboard for Princeton University." Not all aboard for Princeton, all aboard for Princeton University. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of graphics later, which blew me away. But now there's all sorts of, these incredible options which are out there, which transit is proposing, which I think are really quite remarkable. But the first two, as long as there's a light rail, or they replace the Dinky with a light rail system, it's an additional $80 million. And my guess is that's an underestimate. I would put that more like 120 million. Now, my question is, if you actually took, and that's just me, okay, not to you, if you just use option number 3 and said, let's use the $80 million to organize the rest of the system, would that be something quite incredible? Now, transit really has done a remarkable thing. I mean, they've said, okay, let's extend it all the way to McCaffrey's. Let's extend it to McCaffrey's up Witherspoon Street. And then it'll come up, it'll go down, it'll come up, it'll go down. Okay, and I thought, well, that's pretty good. At least that's a start. And it would be a two-way system. But the question for me and for you is, should there be alternative routes to this system? Should we say to transit, listen, we love your system. We would like to see more people served by it. So I'm going to ask you to think about this. Now, the thing is pretty clear. Every place I've done, you've got to talk about smaller buses. And the university is going to do that with your smaller electric buses. These big behemoths going through town just doesn't make any sense. And they're not sexy. They're not sexy. Nobody wants to get in those big buses. But if you start to do the research and you look at the new little buses that are in Germany and Sweden and all the rest of them, they're cool, they're interesting, they're easy to get on, they're a low stepper. You can see a lot of people going through it, and they go round and round and round and round and round. And at some point, they could even be electric, they could be autonomous if you needed to have it. So here's my first question for you. Let's assume we have electric buses that go from the station to the town in some form or another. If you took a red marker, where would you actually put the line? Now, I want to advance this just a little bit for you, because there's two parts to this thing. One, the red marker and the yellow marker. So the first one is, okay, let's assume that you have the 5-minute walking distance. Let me just show you this. This is a shot at Witherspoon and Nassau Street. There's your 5-minute walking distance. There's your 10 minutes. Now, the professionals are telling me now that people have a tendency with sustainability to start to walk a little bit farther than the 5 minutes. If you have a decent sidewalk and a safe place to walk, they will walk a little bit more than the 5 minute. But you know, this town is not a single place, it's polycentric. So you got the downtown, you've got the shopping center, which is growing, and then you have got Jugtown, and then you got Chestnut. So you really got a polycentric town of 3 spots, of which none of those spots, except one, is served by New Jersey Transit's proposed line. Now, you put the 10-minute walking distance on it, and you start to see if we could serve these areas, we could absolutely serve an extraordinary number of people. That would be very close to a transit system if we did a loop around the downtown. Now, here's a thought, and again, I'm pushing it, but it's up to you to decide where it's going to go. What would happen if it actually got extended around? And what would happen if we took that loop and said, because it can't come up Witherspoon Street because of the new construction, right? We're at the top. So we have to come down either Little or Birch, and they're one way. So what would happen if we would take it down Bayard and back? We just serve more people. Same kind of loop around, and then so I drove this multiple times now. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, noon, early in the morning, and it's 20 minutes to go round and round and around that thing. From the station, around 20 minutes, so how many buses would you actually need to do that? So I'm gonna stop here and say to you, all right, think about this. Where would you put the loop? Take your red marker, the group of you, and figure out from the station, draw right on that tracing paper, where you think this loop should go. So I'll give you about 10 minutes to do that, just trying to figure that out.
It's shooting the students, and the students don't want to go to
I don't
that makes sense, but it's right now the way they have it. It seems like that just retraces everything they have money. It's money. They are limited budget. Every system is expensive.
Yeah, but it's the same for every Wigmans is expensive.
It's a lot cheaper than.
So yeah, you basically have this circle, you need to go around this circle. If you
maybe between the
Why not have it
I'm still trying to get over the shop.
Yeah.
You know, the shop is.
This is there.
Let me get this back.
As you were saying. All right, now, the next part of this thing, assuming that you got your red line drawn in some form or another, now the question is, take your, the circle templates that you have on your desk there, and let me just show you a couple of things here. This is where we left off. Now, this young lady I talked to here in the middle of the table, she was saying, well, if you have a bus system, you know, it's going to stop traffic and it's going to be delayed and what have you. Now, the 20-minute route that I did, I went through all the traffic to try to do it, but you know, tried all the stop signs. That was, you know, all the stoplights, all the corners, all the people pulling out, what have you. But there will be obviously some delay depending upon where you put the stops. Now, this particular set of maps, and this is just a simple set of diagrams. Here's the first one. It says, if you did this loop, which is in Nassau Street, North Harrison Valley, Bayard, and a double flip on to Little and Birch, here's what 6 stops would look like. Which means that at this particular point, you got a certain percentage of town which is covered by that 5-minute walk. Now, you take one look at that, and again, you may or may not have done that loop, but that's okay. The next one is what happens if you have 8 stops. More people would become involved with it because you've expanded the actual length of the system. But now, if you look at North Harrison, and I don't know how many of you do it, but I've got several doctors who are up in that little group up on the top. And that is a very popular place. So I went, okay, what happens if we have 9 stops and we go, okay, but we extend it all the way up and we come down the street and then connect back in with 9 stops. Now the disadvantage of this thing is that the bigger the loop, the more buses are going to be required. There's to be 2 ways. There would be 5 buses going one direction and 5 buses going the other direction. It has to be every 10 minutes. You can't wait longer than 10 minutes. And there, as the lady there just indicated, the problem here is you never know what the bus is and when it's going to, where it's going to go and when it's going to come back. Now, I used to go to commute to Rutgers. I didn't take the train, but I took the bus. Left at Princeton absolutely on time within a minute. Not a problem whatsoever. I sometimes waited an hour and a half in New Brunswick to come back because you just never knew where or when that bus was actually coming back. And there was no signs, there was no nothing. Now, technology has improved significantly that we can now track these buses. We know where they are, we know when they're going to come and when they're going to stop, and that can all be correlated. So the question for me starts to become, when you think about these loops, and you can modify it however you want, this one seemed to me to be the one, and that was just personal observation, would be the one that would serve the largest numbers of people in the town over a long period of time. Now, what was interesting about this one is that, and I alluded to this before, this was done in the last workshop, this susceptibility to change, and they put a dinky stop there, because that was your transit had planned to run it up to the shopping center and then coming back. And I went, well, if you actually put it here and moved it, and then did your 5-minute circle, we would get all the folks who are in Vade Drive to be able to walk to the transit stop. Now, you might not think it makes a difference, but you move these bus stations further, or these bus stops, more than 5 minutes away, and people are going to default to something else. That's the question. It has to be within that 5-minute walking distance.
Have you considered just eliminating the cars in a large area?
I would love to do that, but that ain't going to happen immediately, but maybe we'll have
if you have enough of a bus system and a good
If you have
circulation
enough of the,
in the
remember
way,
that diagram I showed you? The more this system operates, the less cars and parking will require, period. So the cost benefit of this stuff, and of course, here's the one for downtown. And then we went, well, what happens if you put one around the Chestnut Street? That's a little intersection there. And Jugtown, you can see the number of people then that start to be served by that. But here is the kicker. Here is the train station. Here's what people told us around the train station. quite surprisingly, the susceptibility to change was all along the front of the golf course, all over the parking lot, and what have you. But look what happens with a 5-minute walking distance. No one is served. No one is served by that. And even if you begin to extend it to a 10-minute walk, literally no one is served. That's why they call it the university station as opposed to the Princeton station. I thought that one was pretty interesting. Now, here the question is that little marker that you have, that basic DNA, that 5-minute walking distance, is what you have on your table, and you have two of them. You have a negative and a positive. Now, one of the things that's important is not only do you need these stops, but you need to have information, and you need to have a decent bus stop. And these bus stops, these are ones we designed for Milwaukee, the ones at the top. They have an infrared heater on it for the wintertime. So you can, and they have an information system on it, and they have a glass roof on it, so that you actually feel that you're actually in a place, and that place is really something to be celebrated and not something that you would put aside. So here is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to take a blue dot, it would be a blue magic marker, put a dot where you think the stop should be, and then circle it around with the yellow dot in terms of the 5-minute walking distance. Let's see what you got. So
This is it right here. Yeah, so do which side of it?
So you're okay.
But I think maybe up on the other side of fire. Right here. Well, this one we gotta have anyway to connect.
And you get the theology.
And I got my
The stop.
Well,
No, they don't have to have a stop. They can be cutting the stop.
you're going to come to something soon. Just hang on.
Oh, that's a good point. With technology, we could,
So I guess we need to do this one and this one. Right, clean and
All right, we're one of those incredible variations on these loops. These are just kind of guesses. But one of the things that has been fairly clear from the very beginning, and I expect that it's one of the reasons why Save the Dinky is as important as what it is that what you have in history of cities and new cities as well, is that you have lines, you have tracks, you have a way for people to understand where the thing is going, when it is coming, and when it is going to go back. Now, how do you do that without tracks? And that was one of the big things that I've been worried about for a while. And I thought, what happens if you simply painted a line on the street? Okay, it's the orange line, the blue line, the green line. It's called the power of paint. And the buses run on that. Now, some of the new Chinese buses actually have a line that's electrified in that colored line. It charges as it goes along. There are all sorts of technologies out there, which is clear. But this one was, and I remember they used to have these little kind of trolley cars. I know it didn't last for very long. But I thought the problem is that if you knew that this yellow line was the bus line, and you could know where the stops were and what time it was coming, it would be so much easier to understand, because right now, without a clear indication of where it's going and what the loop is and what the color of the bus is, you simply don't know. And that is why there is so, in my opinion, little use. But anyway, that's something for you to start to think about. Okay, now I want to move on to the next overlay. And this is the question of the pedestrian now. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about the pedestrians. I mean, it's just, everybody wants the place to become more pedestrian. Now, historically, Nassau Street, this is a shot in 1910. The reason why Nassau Street is what it is now is because it has 18-foot wide sidewalks. And it allowed things to spill out onto the street. When I first moved here 40 years ago, you couldn't have a cafe on the street. It was illegal because it would despoil the character of the town. And now it's everywhere, because that is the kind of vitality that you need as a pedestrian to actually make a place begin to work. So I think the big question starts to be on this, where do we actually do this? Now, clearly here it started. I mean, I couldn't have applauded this one more. And this is a little doodle, I call these doodles, that I did last year, right after they announced it. And you know, I've spent a lot of time in Europe. Toulouse is my favorite city of all time. It has 30 miles of shared streets, which is the little streets in the middle and the two big sidewalks on the side. Now, granted here, they're gonna put a two-way street with more parking on it. I wish that wasn't the case, but it can go back to two-way. Two-lane, I know, it's got two-lane with one side parking. Now, I fully understand that, but it also could become 2 lanes if it ever needed to be without parking. But anyway, this is proceeding, and it's a really great thing that's really started to happen. Now, there is a whole secondary pedestrian system that could happen in this town. And it has started already. If you start on Chambers Street, if you're at the new hotel, you walk diagonally across the street, you can start a pedestrian walk that walks through the parking lot, through Palmer Square, through the square itself, next to the new Triumph Brewery, down next to the Alchemist and Barrister, and then you come to the end. Now, what happened? What would happen if this could be extended? Now, here is an interesting one, because look at that circle. That's the intersection of the walkway, and here it is now. So again, we just start to do these kind of little sets of doodles, and this is one that we kicked around with Sheldon early on and said, you know, I lived a lot of time in Boston. If you want to follow Boston, you follow the little red brick road, right? It takes you all the way through, really easy. You just look down the ground, you can follow around, you don't need a tour guide. I said, what would happen is we just simply paint it on an orange line. Now, not that orange is my favorite color, but you know, what it is, it's ubiquitous. And then I thought, well, what happens if we extended it? Now, Princeton Future is really in charge of Dome Alley. And it's a really kind of a wonderful spot if you keep after it. And you know, right now we currently climb the planters, we have some hanging in it just to keep people kind of interested. We wish they didn't throw their beer bottles and their cigarette butts around, but be that as it may. But when you get down to the end, you got this behemoth of a truck parked down the end, in my guess, an illegal parking spot. Well, whoever owns what, I've never seen that truck there before, and if you put the mirror out, you cannot pass. I mean, it's just like, okay, be that as it may. But every space is packed in town. I mean, if you got a little corner, somebody's going to be parking in it. Because parking is although they keep saying, yeah, we have plenty of parking spaces, they're just not in the right spot based on the 5-minute walking distance, as you probably know. So, and you know, this is a municipal owned lot, and here is the thought. And just again, a thought for you guys. And what I like about you guys is so far, I'm looking around, you're looking at the stuff that we give you, and then you do deviations, which is fantastic. You know, you're not following the rules. My rules anyway, but you're not, which is great. That's what you're supposed to do. But look at this. Now, you know as well as I do that there's already one of these alleys currently exists. In fact, 2 of them exist. The one next to the record exchange and the one that goes from the parking garage back. Paved and done already. Dome Alley is done. Now, what would happen if this, you know, now Witherspoon is being redone, which is fantastic. What would happen if this thing, and you know, one of the restaurants has moved outside, what happens if these 8 parking spots would disappear? And all of a sudden there would be a little cafe on the side, and then, hey, what would happen if actually we paved it and then we put a kind of a glass enclosure around it and we extend the whole kind of walkway system to the back? Would that be something we would want to do?
Thanks for not disappearing the bike parking.
Yes, I'm gonna bring that up. There's a lot of bike parking there.
The bike parking is
On the right.
Okay, now, here's my question for you. Orange marker. Would you extend the pedestrian path and where? Would you extend the pedestrian path and where? It doesn't have to be here, and if you don't do it, that's fine. If you do it, that's great. I would just like to know, would that be a good idea to extend? We're going to move on to another interesting question for you. When we did the susceptibility to change work a couple of weeks ago, what came up very high in that was Witherspoon Street. how to deal with Witherspoon Street. Now, I know there's a big engineering study done, but I was really interested when people did the susceptibility change map. They put a big green line down Witherspoon Street and they said, make it a green street. I said, well, what is a green street? Now, so the question was, okay, there it is now. And again, like we all like to do, I did the doodles and I thought, well, a green street that I know of, Minneapolis and other places, I like a curved street down, and they make it a curve, kind of a straight, and they put lots of trees on it, and I went, they'll never ever go for this one, but we have twice as many trees, and of course, as you can see, the power lines are a bit obscured. I went, well, nah, but what happens if we actually created some kind of a pattern on it, even if we just painted it on? So then I went, okay, but what happens if you do a bicycle lane and do the pattern and extend the pattern all the way across the sidewalks onto itself? Then, in asking people what they wanted, here was a priority, and probably you guys know that. Prioritize wiring underground. Make that the only street in town, if we have to do a street, where all the wiring goes underground. It is the main green spine in town. So the next one was upgrade sidewalks and curbs, texture to the street, limited parking, improve bicycle access, historic street lights, get rid of the Cobra head lights on it, take the lights all the way down the street, and more housing, retail services, cafes and gathering spots. And these are little doodles that kind of came out of it. So here's my question for you. Using a green marker, if you put a green marker on Witherspoon Street, would you make Witherspoon Street a green street, and how far, what pieces of it, would you go all the way down the valley? Would you not do it at all? Just green marker. So that's the next one. Give you a couple of minutes to do that, because that shouldn't be, whether you like it or you don't like it. Absolutely.
That's CP, right?
Listen, I talked to PSA for 40 years. I know the story. It can be done. It just can't be done.
That's CP.
But it's just money.
Yes, the pool is there.
It's true.
It's just money. Anyway, so that's the question. You put a line down Green Street, tell me where it would go, and if you don't put a line there, that's fully understandable. Green Street. So I've got
Well, only flooding is
I just go, okay, I can't wait to see how they're going to do that. Yeah.
But you don't think that maybe if there were a structure for bikers that they could teach bikers, which would be trying to but have you ever seen
Bikers
other?
are going to be more responsible. All the money that we spend towards political, it's just a business. All the enforcement is on the pedestrians to jail. After all, when was the last pedestrian that took a issue to jail? And these candidates tell me.
When was a ticket issued to a biker who doesn't know stopping at a red light?
I mean, I don't know. I think there needs to be more education around. Like, why not?
That's part of it.
Why not educate the bikers? We were just talking on bike rules. I think we can see other towns and models where it's just ingrained, it's not in our but it's just there's multiple just like you get a driver test. It's like
It led to a lot of hostility.
why?
That's a logical physical place.
I never understood why. To me, it makes so much sense.
I think the owners started to make it too cityfied, and that's a constant battle, of course.
It's just like people in my neighborhood. You know, Witherspoon and Franklin. Nobody, it's just NIMBY. They were our friends.
Now, the next one is the bicycle scooter network. Okay, the bicycle scooter network. Now, we know that there have been enormous numbers of studies, and they're really unbelievable. And of course, the growing thing, of course, is the scooters. Scooters are starting to become a big alternative transportation mode. And the question is, are the scooters considered to be more a bicycle, or are they considered to be a vehicle, or exactly how it begins to work? Are we going to have to talk about shared sidewalks for this, with a line down the middle like lots of people do, or how else were we going to begin to do it? Now, there are some remarkable, there's just a beautiful bicycle study that was done. It's graphically absolutely superb. I mean, it's graphically beautiful to look at. Everything is laid out. As you have gone through it, all the sections are done, and I went, my. Wouldn't it be incredible if we could actually implement some of that somewhere at some point? Because I don't think any of it's actually been built.
A little bit.
A little bit. So anyway, these were early simulations, and you probably recognize the street was like, hey, what would happen if, but the big thing here, of course, what has disappeared is the parallel parking. And of course, we'll get to parking at the end, David's favorite subject. Now, here is a question that is coming out there in all the bicycle literature out there now. It is that in order to do a bicycle network, it needs to extend out about 2.5 miles. In the same way that people will walk 5 minutes without their car, they will use their bicycle for about 2.5 miles out, provided that is reasonably safe to be able to do it. Now, this is a really big question. There's all sorts of possibilities, but if you had to prioritize a street or one street or two streets that you think should have a bicycle path on it, what would it be? In a blue line. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's a problem about how you do it. You paint on the road the way we do now, saying this is for a bicycle.
All right, are you finished enough to the point that we need to move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, here is the next one I really want to talk about. Let's assume you look at your map, you got your red loop on there, you got your bicycle one, you got the dangerous intersections, you're starting to build up a network, but what happens to those people who are outside of your yellow circles, that are outside the transit loop? Now, there is an answer to that one. It's been out for a whole lot of years. It's very apparent in Europe, and there's no reason why it couldn't happen here. It's called on-demand transit. Now let's assume this is the loop that I put, but obviously looking at what you guys do, I've got a whole lot more creative ideas that have come out of this workshop. But what happens if you just take that little bit and you look at the rest of the town? The rest of the town is simply not served. Now, there's some people over the corner that said, can you run a bus all the way out to my house and back? Well, no. Honestly, we can't. Not to make it efficient, but we can use an on-demand system. Let me show you how that works. This was done in 1994, and it was done in Bergen County. And it came out of a book that I originally wrote called Vision for the New American Dream. And it was, how do we serve suburbia? How do we get transit in suburbia? And at that point, they had just begun to understand GPS systems, because the trucking companies were using GPS to track where their trucks were. And we put together a thing called the Flexible, Friendly Neighborhood Transit Facility, and worked out all the details to make it happen. And you can see the little poster down the bottom. We got hired by Bergen County to actually do it. Now, that was back then. This one was in September 2000, in September 2019. That was done by Princeton Future. And this was the big rage when everybody was coming up with autonomous vehicles. You know, hey, our answer is going to be, we're going to have autonomous vehicles, they're going to run around, take care of everything, we can program everything to begin to happen. And obviously with the improvement of AI, that's getting better and better by the day. But it ain't here yet, and it won't be here for a while. But how do you begin to do that? So this is what we did in Bergen County way back when, and I'm suggesting that we might want to think about this here in Princeton, particularly those areas which are not as served. I mean, could you imagine if everybody in this town was within a 5-minute walk of a transit access to any place of the town for a very inexpensive price? Now, these are TAZ zones. This is a standard TAZ zone, a transportation access zone. Every town has them. And they break them down so you can tell who goes where you're going, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what we did is we put a number on each one. We put a number on each one. Now, what we did is we created a various series of flags, and we called it the computer commuter. This is number 12. Stop. Now, on-demand transit modes, if we could get it to happen, rather than Uber, which by the way, totally copied this thing we did, took the thing and totally copied it back then. We never did anything more about it way back when. What they went is door to door. And this suggested you do it point to point using your DNA, your 5-minute walking distance, to set those points in the neighborhood that you would then walk to, meet your neighbors, drop your kids off, drop your laundry off, or what have you, and you would call up the system, and the system would say, and you'll see a little clip of a movie here, we'll be there in 5 minutes. Now, we did this car. This is what we used in our movie first time. And we had people who were so disappointed they couldn't get in it. Wait a minute, what are all these signs that are around town and this thing moving around? Why can't we begin to use that? So, if I can get this movie, a little clip of the movie. So it's when you want, where you want, and it's simply a matter of setting up a post with a sign on it. So people can get in at any one point and go to any other point, and it goes, so you get picked up at stop number 27, you call the thing, it says I'll be there in 2 minutes or 3 minutes, however the route goes. There's no route, it just goes from point to point to point to point. It's constantly circulating. So it picks up as many as 6 or 8, and it depends upon what the size of the vehicle is. So anybody can go anywhere in town. You don't ever have to get in the bus. Now, this is kind of a bit hokey, but this is how this works. I hope you can hear it.
The CC service car will be there in 7 minutes. Would you prefer to schedule their pickup today? No. Your departure from stop 27 is confirmed. Have a nice day.
That's the way it works. This is back then, and now the technology is so unbelievably much better. There's no doubt that this whole system could work. Off your swipe card, go any place in town. So what happened is a loop would just go loop, 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 serving all of those folks. And the on-demand system would service everything else to take you any place in town within roughly a 25-minute typical commute. So it would take you out to West Windsor, it would take you to East Brunswick, but it can't go more than 25 minutes out. So what you do is you just divide all of those particular pieces. Now, we presented this back, I don't know, way back when to a senior citizens group, and we worked out all the numbers. This is a moneymaker. Now, the cost-benefit analysis of this thing is pretty incredible. That is what was done way back when. Now, what I'm kind of wondering about, the CC then was picked up by Uber, which really, unbelievable. I went, boy, did I miss an opportunity there. They picked up that report and said, we can make this thing work, but
it would be more like a taxi, you know, that it would go door to door to door. Now, the thing that's interesting, we have a taxi system in town, but I remember coming back one night at Princeton Junction from a trip in Europe. I was tired, I had to go to Bank Street, it cost me $60. Cost me $60 for a cab ride. I mean, that was just freaking unbelievable. But the reality is that that's the reality of what happens here. If you have something that moved around like that all the time, we could literally serve in the transit system everybody in this town. And if we even thought about that even in a more progressive way, could you imagine what would happen if the children who are brought to the Hun School by their mothers standing in line with their SUVs could be eliminated? If these kids could get on a on-demand system like this with a safe driver that they knew, we could turn this thing into a transportation mecca.
Tony, how does that coordinate with the bus system? In other words, if you can take this on-demand system to anywhere in town,
That's right.
does that take ridership away from the bus system?
I would suspect that the bus system, you would have to call it, you have to wait, with the bus system, I think just does a loop, 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 loop. I think the bus system would be would be popular. I think that it's really meant to serve the lower densities part of it. And I think the other question is, David, if we combine what you guys have here as a loop, all these loops, we get 10 teams, we lay them all on top of each other, we find out where kind of a consensus is. Then we lay on top of that the susceptibility to the change map that people did 2 or 3 weeks ago. And if that correlates with the loop, then that's where the higher densities, but key is other folks are up. But it's an interesting question that you had. Would it actually decrease the total number of people because it would be so popular? That I don't know, but in most cases, the loop system, if you know it's there, and I know other people, Sweden, other people have it, the system continues to run because it's good for seniors, it's good for kids, it's good for while they still have all this mass transit system. So the two, I think, if we took all of this stuff together, and that's what you guys are seeing in this map, the on-demand, the loop, the bicycles, the pedestrianism, and the last thing we're going to talk about is parking, you would have a holistic system in this town that would be the envy of everybody. That's just the thought on it. So here's my question for you. If you were to do this, and this is just a thought on it, where would you put these things? Where out there would it be? And I mean, I don't know. These are just randomly put. And so I'm kind of depending upon you guys to tell me, what the thing would actually look like. So using brown circles and dots, if you will, the brown magic marker, just take your marker and say, hey, listen, beyond our loop, beyond your yellow thing, where would you actually put that? Are there really interesting neighborhoods? Now, for the couple that's sitting in the back, you can see how that would work for you guys. But the key is it's not door to door.
Yeah, I'm confused how this is better than Uber, because Uber is door to door, then I can wait
Because
comfortably in my house.
one is cheaper, significantly cheaper, number one, and number two, the idea that people would walk. And sometimes maybe you have a bus stop that runs up right in front of your door. Good, 5 minutes is the maximum you can walk to the side, right? That's what it'll say. If you actually found out that you wound up to stop right in front of your door, you would be really pretty easy. The key is for sustainability in the future and healthy in the future is to get people to walk more.
In theory,
That's
you
a
can
different-
share-
I think
in
that's
theory, you
a
can share
different-
Uber, but people don't for the most part. And I think that the fundamental assumption is it's shared.
Yeah.
That any other rider in town can get on at any point.
That's right.
You don't have, it's
not
different from a
exclusive.
taxi in
But
that way.
it sounds like it's harder in terms of scheduling.
No. You call them up. You call them up and say, I'm on my stop 22 and I want to go downtown, which is 1. And it says to you, 4 minutes.
But realistically, these days we do it on an app, right?
Absolutely. And now the AI is so good that it simply traces where that bus is, how many people are on it, how many people are going to have, and tells you exactly how many minutes that bus will be there, and it'll be there within a 1 to 2 minute window. Incredible. It's technology which we need to start exploring in a big way. Therefore, Princeton could, I mean, theoretically could, become quite an extraordinary movement, and then all the effects of traffic and what have you start to diminish. So it's an interesting thought, but take that circle template, put the little dots, and just, I don't care how many dots you put on it, but just kind of figure out, in my neighborhood. And if you guys put it right in front of your house, put it right in front of your house. I mean, put it right in front of your house. Last piece of it is what everybody loves to talk about in this town, and that is parking, right? So here's a question that I have for you. The thing is that, all the studies that have been done that said, listen, downtown is primarily dependent upon cars and parking. And as I said earlier, is it even feasible to limit that until this multimodal, what's on your plan, if what was on your various plans got implemented, we wouldn't have a parking problem. But this is not going to get implemented overnight, that's for sure. So the question starts to be, until that time, are there unrealized parking solutions? Now, here's a question I have, and you all know that I walk around downtown a lot now. Every conceivable space that I know is jammed with a car. I mean, all over. And I have gotten my fair share of parking tickets across the board, which I totally despise, but nonetheless it happens. So the question starts to me, is there two elements of this parking thing? One is what I call incrementalism, which each site provides its own parking, right? Whatever the parking, minimum, maximum parking. Or the other one is collective corporate development, which I really like. That's called shared parking, right? Now, there are 7 types of parking. Not 1, not 2, not 3, there's 7. On-street, parallel, and head-in, we know that. Here it's on-street parallel, although Nassau Street originally was head-in. It was originally head-in, which means they had double the number of parking spaces on because they just headed in. And you can see that. Surface parking lots, we have a few of those, but the bottom line is surface parking lots are the land banks of the future. Period. Surface parking lots are the land banks of the future. There should not be any surface parking lots ever, anywhere in urban areas. Next one is on-site parking garages. We have several of those. Chambers Street might be called an on-site private garage. I have a space there. And then there's individual development, underbuilding podium, or a podium. Underbuilding is the new hotel, the graduate hotel, right in my backyard, right on the property line. I mean, it's a 30-foot deep hole in the ground. They ran into all sorts of problems because they ran into solid rock that had to be blasted out. It shook our whole house up for days and days and days. Or podium, which means you build up and you put the parking, then you build up something above it. But the unrealized ones, I think, what I call local neighborhood mixed-use shared parking facilities. And the other one is community shared parking facilities, which means rather than a developer paying for $35 or $40 or $55,000 for an underground parking spot, or building a parking garage, which is $25,000 to $30,000 a space, what you do is you say to them, you don't have to build any parking. Your building you can build, but you have to contribute to a larger collective parking facility within a reasonable walk or a easy commute. Now, any of you guys here are all probably good road travelers. You ever been to Zurich? Any of those cities? All of those cities have parking on the periphery and you're shuttled in. All of these cities have that. I mean, Toulouse is incredible. It's primarily 30 miles of pedestrian streets. Still, people got cars, they park their cars at the deck, they walk out of the deck, they either take a streetcar or what have you, and they're any place they want to go in town. Can you imagine what we could do with this whole system if that would happen? So the other one is regional intercepts. And that's been talked about a lot. So here is one thought. Again, these are just one thought. What happens if on the new Dinky line or whatever it's going to be, there is a major regional intercept off of Route 1 that then connected to your fantastic loops that got you to the downtown. So all the commuters that come in could get downtown in 3 minutes or 4 minutes and drop you off any place on your loop wherever you wanted to go, and it would be relatively inexpensive to build. And I got first experience of that when I did the plan for Harvard Square 65 or 70 years ago. We built a parking structure, Harvard Square, no parking allowed at all. We did a little bit, very little. Everything was out on Alewife. So we extended the red line right to the parking structure. You came out of 287, you parked at a 10,000 car parking garage, and you took the red line into Cambridge so nobody would have to build parking. And now, of course, Cambridge is, I'm a bit prejudiced coming out of Harvard. It's an extraordinary place with very little traffic, and now they have absolutely eliminated all parking requirements. Done, none, zero, because they have these other things in place. Now, we could have that in place here, that's just a thought. Now, the 3 decks we have downtown are pretty interesting, actually. If you actually plot the walk distances around the 3 lots itself, you say, well, look at most of the town is actually covered within decent walking distance of these particular lots, if they're not full. If they're not full. And a lot of people, I live on Bank Street, and as much as discussion has been on Bank Street, it's the only place in town you have free parking. People come from all over. I had some Texas people came and parked there for the whole day. And it's like, it's free parking, you don't have to pay for it. And people are cheap. So they don't want to pay the $2 or the $3 or whatever it is to park in the parking structure. And maybe they don't even know where it is, I'm not really sure. But I looked at this and said, my gosh, if people could actually park in these parking structures and we had enough space in these parking structures, that would take care of the problem and it would free up all those other spaces where everybody's kind of jamming their stuff into it right now. So here is an idea for you, just a thought. We already have in the bottom left-hand corner there, we already have a mixed-use parking structure, which is really pretty cool. I wish more stores were full, but it's a pretty cool building. You park underneath or below, housing up above and retail, it really works very well. But look at the one next to it, and then look at the parking garage and back to the library. Very successful. Retail at the bottom level, parking up above. And then look at the other 2 up above. They're really, the granddaddy of one is the Mill, which is in Portland, Oregon. I didn't even know it was a parking structure. It looked like a building. It didn't look like a parking structure, standard kind of like concrete kind of structure. It didn't look like a building because it had regular modulated windows and they had a structure inside which they painted flat black, so you couldn't even tell it was there. But then the top one is really the granddaddy of them all, the green one. That's all residential up above. Now, the little section on the side is typical. That would be, okay, retail at the bottom, housing up above, parking in the back, and it could go 1 level underground. This would be super cheap to build. Super cheap relative to digging 35 feet of ground, for sure. So the question starts to be, those are examples of what I call mixed-use parking structures. Now, my question is that, if we were to build mixed-use, 1 or 2, 3 mixed-use parking structures, downtown somewhere, if we would build those someplace to begin temporarily to relieve the parking problem and to free up more space for your pedestrian realms, for all the rest of the stuff that you guys have got, where would they be if they would be anywhere? So that's really the question, is the kind of ultimate question for you at some point. So I appreciate you take the purple marker, put a rectangle in terms of where you think an additional mixed-use parking structure may want to be located. Now, the other thing that you have to remember is that these parking structures have to be flat slab. They can't be helical. They cannot be helical. Helical means you're doing a loop, you're going up and the stuff, the floors are like this. Primarily because in the future, that is going to be transformed into housing, retail, offices, gardens, growing food, whatever, schools, but the plates have got to be flat.
So flat slab means it would only be 1 floor?
One floor. It's 1 floor, it's helical or whatever. Most of the time it's a helical ramp on the outside. You tear the ramp down and you got the floors left, which are flat, which can then be converted to some other use. One of the big uses lately has been, we can grow our own vegetables right downtown. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so just to be real clear, it can have more than 1 level of parking.
Yes.
But it has to have, like at the airport, a ramp that's separate from the parking rather than the parking itself serving as the ramp.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You have let's say this is a table, let's say this is the parking table, and this is the circular ramp, so you come here, you come up, and you get in here and find a table, and afterwards, this goes away. All right, I mean, it's amazing, we were supposed to have finished this whole thing at 11:40, it's now 11:30, which I think is really incredible. My question, what I would really like now, is it possible for us to, as a whole group of everybody in the room, to simply go table to table to table to get some idea about what you actually did? Would you like to do that? So let's start out here with Rich. Let's just, just get some, we'll just go around the room and have some idea about, if you can, and think about it, and just kind of explain what you did. We'll go from here, there, to where Sheldon is sitting, and then just make our way around the rest of the room. Now, what we're gonna do, just to let you know that the next steps, all of these tracing papers are going to be copied and laid on top of each other to see if we got a synthesis of some of the ideas. That will probably be next, and at some time in the future, we'll show, we'll be able to present whatever these particular results are. But looking at it, beautiful set of graphics. And now when you look at it, you're actually seeing a network, which is really great. All right, so let's start with Rich.
Yeah, hi. Well, we thought about a big parking garage over in the western section, over close to your house, Sheldon.
Thank you, I'm happy to have more parking.
Well, let's add that one to it. No, we thought not on that. But one thing that came out of our thing, and Emma was also here on ours, I originally was kind of reluctant to put parking garages anyplace. And then when Tony explained how a parking garage could actually morph into something else, and that would not have to be this kind of, mono use forever and ever, I put a parking garage right in front of my house on Park Place, thinking that some townhouses could screen it from the rest and fill in those cavities along Park Place. We put in a parking garage on William Street, again, the screen with residential. We thought about a parking garage over on the Y parking lots. And in Harrison Street, which is this huge boulevard, I thought maybe a parking garage could go there. Emma had some thoughts about the transit loop and the walking. Emma had some thoughts about how to take the transit loop and send it further south. You want to explain that?
I don't know if I have a very formulated idea about it.
Well, but instead of bringing it just automatically along Nassau Street, she thought, what about if you swung it further south along Prospect and get people from both sides and maybe attract more, get university people to look at that transit and to get them involved, and it just provides more customers for the transit. So we sort of play off each other's demand there. So.
Or even closer to the canal because of the towpath.
Yeah, now also, I don't think we really figured this out, but Emma raised the question, how could a transit thing get more down toward the canal and the towpath? Which is, once people get there, it's a beloved walking and hiking and bike riding destination. So I don't think we totally solved that, but we tried.
One of the things that's, for me, just looking at that map, which I find interesting, is that most of your parking structures are on the edges, or two of them are on the edges of your transit loop.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Which is just perfect. Park and just jump off, park and then get on the transit loop.
Yeah.
By the way, that is the plan for downtown Milwaukee, which is now starting to be implemented, is a plan that we did. Same thing, put the parking right next to the transit loop and then use the transit loop to get around downtown. Okay, good. All right, you guys want to go next?
Should we pass?
Oh, let's go over here. Let's go over here.
Our table.
Yeah.
Go.
Okay, so, hi everyone. For parking, mixed-use parking structures, I have also across the street from, or next door to Ridge Run over Park Place.
Okay, we got two.
A surface lot that's severely underutilized. One down, of course, these are all ideas. The Bank of America has a huge surface parking lot that's underutilized.
That's a good one.
We put one down at Valley Road, so that's school district property, but this is just visioning. Also wanted the why because again, we're visioning, but there's a lot of underutilized space there. And Monument Hall, which we are looking at, we're doing a facilities analysis. We'd really like to do something with Monument Hall. So Monument Hall could be a perfect mixed use location. That's it. So on the loop, I think the loop was pretty much what we said, just down Nassau, University of Nassau, Witherspoon, loop around Valley, Harrison, and come around. And then we talked about down Walnut, but when we did the circles, the kids could walk to bus stops if we had a bus stop at Franklin, on either end of Franklin. So really there's within 5 minutes, couple minutes, and kids can definitely walk. We could even put one at Valley Road and Walnut as another bus stop, which would be really good for serving kids to get around town. And you know, when you talk about empty school buses and getting kids commuting, this would be terrific. And then do we talk about the multimodal transit, which is something we're really looking into. But having those transit hubs, PCV, Griggs Farm, out at Elmport, Johnson Park, Edel Farm, and then of course the schools, the other two schools, Riverside and Middlebrook. So,
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Also, I really love the fact that, I mean, the thing, if we lay these two on top of each other, what's going to be interesting is that wherever these lines intersect each other, for instance, let's say we got 8 of them that come and say down Witherspoon Street. Well, then that's where it'll go, because then we got the majority of people, the majority of lines happen then on Witherspoon Street. But there may be other deviations. Maybe we only get 1 line on some streets. Sometimes we're going to get 4 lines. But what I like about this one as well is very cleverly, in which you put the multi-use changeable parking structures right on the transit line. Exactly. I mean, that's 2 of you now. So maybe that's something that really has got to be considered more seriously. But I also love the fact that your on-demand stuff went exactly where it should in terms of the overall places that we know people want. Now, what was interesting about that, could that then replace, somebody complained to me before, because I used to live in Bellmead, the long bus ride from Griggs Farm to downtown takes about an hour. Because it goes do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Now the on-demand stuff could get you there instantaneously. So that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will say, we were sort of agonizing about the loop and can it serve our affordable housing developments, which are a little bit more out of town. And then when you brought up the on-demand, it like solves all the problems with the loop. Yeah. So
yeah, no, and also having ridden that bus, I tried to do it for 3 months. I'd try all these things for like 3 months. And only like 1 or 2 people would ever get on at those points, and the bus would be trundling along. So I think that's a brilliant solution. Okay.
Since I have the microphone,
go for it.
Even though we didn't talk about this as a group, and you didn't really talk about it very much, I do want to make the point, and I see Peter standing here, another member of the permit parking task force, that on-street parallel parking, not in the center of town, but adjacent to the center of town, is actually the greenest form of parking because it's already impervious surface, and I think the community does need to think about, and new technology makes it possible to manage that parking in a way that it's not a burden on the residents of those streets, and we should be thinking about that as part of the parking solution.
Agreed, and also, maybe it goes, you don't have to get your car off at night. But anyway, great solutions. Okay, who's here? There you go.
Hi, thank you. One of the things that was sort of a recurring theme in our discussion is that it's not just a matter of physical placement, it's also a matter of educating the public in how to use public transportation. People in Princeton are not used to having it. People who move here from elsewhere come from places where they don't have it. I have asked like a person on the street, do you know if the 605 stops here? And they react like, why would I know that? It's like I asked them for a good brothel or something, But the thing that we suggested is that we should break the habit of thinking in terms of door to door. and that even with the on-demand concept, perhaps it should be point to transit rather than point to point.
Good point.
Get them accustomed to the idea you might have to change modes, and that's not really that complicated if you know where they're going and what they're doing, and if you don't have to pay a separate fare and all that kind of stuff. We also, we had said bus stops near the existing parking garages, whatever kind of bus lines we have, with signage that tells the people who just parked that this is how you get to other parts of town. The Dinky station, criminal in terms of what happens once you get off the train there. Is there a map? Is there a sign? Is there anything to tell you? And I once ran into a friend who was arriving, and lucky for him, he ran into me because I was able to get him to where he was going. There used to be cabs that would hang out there. They're not there anymore either. So, you know, you get in there, there's a blank wall. You know, there's nothing there. You need signage to tell people that it is possible to get from one place to another. So I think that the other thing that we did talk about was even where we drew a loop down Harrison, Valley Road, Bayard, Nassau, even where we have loops, maybe we shouldn't think of a single bus that's doing the whole route. Maybe it's a bus up and down Nassau, a bus up and down Harrison. You would have to transfer, but that might be more efficient in terms of traffic, especially since Harrison isn't really that wide. Nassau's got a lot of space, but we could have a reserve bus lane on Nassau, at least for the length of the campus. But in some other places, like Harrison and Bayard, where the streets are narrower, that might be an option.
You hit on something that was interesting when the plan was done for Milwaukee, because it was exactly that system. There was a loop that went around, and there were two buses that went this way and went that way. And the key was to exchange, so that at that point of exchange is where there would be a cafe, there would be people would meet, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a way in which you kind of congealed community by allowing it, but it had to be right on time, so it was easy.
Yeah.
You know, all the cities that I've gone to, these points where trolleys or what have you meet, there's always cafes there. There's people there, there's kids running around. So that's a very intriguing idea. I mean, they'll loop it. I you know, again, the wonderful thing about these workshops is you get a whole range of ideas.
I think one of the keys, Tony, and I thank you very much for this, is that the signage at each stop for whatever transit is developed says the connection is coming in 10 minutes or the connection is coming in 5 minutes, and it says so that you know you'll be able to catch the Amtrak at the right time. It's really incredibly simple, but it hasn't happened because I believe transponders of coach, transponders of Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, the buses, and Tiger Transit do not travel on the same frequency. So they don't know, they aren't able to be on the neon sign at each stop. There have been so many times I've gone and waited for the 605 and it takes 6 minutes longer than I thought it was going to take, and it really screws you up. You
There's
can't
no place to
depend
sit down.
on it. And you got to be able to depend on this stuff, especially if you're in the shopping center and you live out, you get your bicycle to the stop. You want to be sure you're catching the Amtrak or whatever it is. You got it. It's the signs. How can we get the computer department? Eric Schmidt's building, this huge building, computer science, best in the world. The university ought to be able to make it so that we can look at a sign and know that the darn bus is going to come.
They have
that,
them all,
David?
Yeah, they have them.
Let's do it.
Yeah, they have them all. They have them in all sorts of other places. I mean, have you ever been to Hong Kong? You ever been to Hong Kong? You get one little ticket that goes to the ding-ding, goes to the transit system, goes to the bus. You just pass it as you go through, and it's automatic for everything. And every place there's a sign that says,
the next thing is here in 2 minutes. I mean, the technology is all there. It's been there for
Tompkins-
years.
Tompkins County has worked with Cornell and Ithaca College, and you could do that. You get one ticket and you will get there.
You know, I said, when we looked at all those kind of, all the providers, there needs to be coordination in that. There needs to be like a transportation planner. That's full-time job is just to do that.
Yep.
Anyway, okay, let's move on to another team back here. Ooh, the very complicated diagram.
It started out with the idea that we wanted to connect all of the town with a bus system. And then it was like, well, if we're having this here, then maybe we should have a link to the other section. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And the same thing happened with the bike lanes. And with the bike lanes, we had done a survey a while back on how PHS, Princeton High School students, get to and from school by bike or by walking.
Oh, good for you guys.
And it's 75% of the student body, and they gave where they wanted bike lanes, how that, like which, and created a heat map basically. And so the really dark bike lanes on here are where they wanted bike lanes so they could get to school safer.
Cool.
And also where they frequently ride, and then some other ones I just thought, well, these streets would be good to have a bike.
Now, is there a difference graphically between where you put the really thick lines and where you put the thin lines?
So the thick lines, they're mostly in, well, there's this branch, and then there's these.
And the thick lines were the survey.
The survey
Got
ones.
it. Okay, got it. Okay.
And yes, and then the thinner ones are just, I thought, well, the bus route would hypothetically on this map connect most of the town, and so you might as well have a bike lane there as well.
Okay.
So that when you're biking, it's not, well, you have a bike lane here, but then you can't get anywhere else in town with it. And so I just decided, well, you might as well connect the rest of town to it.
Now, a question I have for you guys. And this is a very complicated loop bus system. When you did the on-demand, does the on-demand system then preclude some of your loops as you, because I did the on-demand later. Maybe I'm thinking about this workshop, if we do it again, we maybe have to do the on-demand system earlier than we did it at the end. You live and you learn when you do these workshops. So what you're thinking about that?
So the on-demand grew out of a secondary bus loop, essentially.
Got it.
So whereas our original bus loop was this, the secondary bus loop became this one, and then when we realized that there was an on-demand element, we then said, okay, these stops become on-demand stops.
So what you did is like the Circle Line in London. You have the
Yes.
interior Circle Line, and then you have the exterior
Periphery,
Circle
yeah.
periphery on the. Oh, that's it. That's a cool idea.
And
again, you never know what you're gonna. What
And
people,
could you
what people are
alternate,
gonna come
Tony?
up with.
Could you have, instead of having every bus go every 10 minutes, could you have one loop go this way and then the other?
Oh, they have to go two ways. Yeah, they have to go two ways. You can't, because if you were here and you wanted to go there, you'd have to wait all the way around. I mean, no, they gotta go two ways. That's pretty cool. But I like this idea of the double loop system, and also, very ambitious notion of the bicycle paths. I mean, hey, listen, if the only thing we have to sacrifice is parallel parking. The only thing you have to do is sacrifice is parallel parking.
But you can go further and sacrifice all the cars. And ultimately, that has to be the goal.
You are really this Mr. Radical, aren't you? You want to get rid of all the cars?
Well, the one in the middle.
I like it.
Access system that works, and eventually that has to be the solution.
Well, listen, I don't keep bringing up Toulouse, but I love Toulouse because there's no cars in the city.
Well, that's
Gone. All the cars are gone. It's all pedestrian and bicycle. There's periodically a car goes through, but it's really done. This is really an interesting. You guys did. Like the job.
Thanks.
Okay, back here.
Okay, so we did our loop we wanted to go on Nassau Street. I like the idea of the two directional though, that you get up to Nassau Street, you can go right or left. But we were gonna go Nassau and down Harrison, and we, instead of going with Wigginger Valley, we extended it down to 206, so we could also catch Griggs Farm and come up and then up to 206. So I like that, you know, the idea of having buses going in both directions on that loop. You could also do an inner loop. We did our hubs for on demand in all of the like affordable housing areas, and kind of one per each neighborhood. Because we didn't quite finish what we were working on, but yeah, definitely catching all the affordable housing that way is a great way to do it instead of having like multiple loops. We did bikes on Hamilton Wiggins and wanted to have the essentially the bike path on PO into Community Park along the pool complex and Nassau Street on the south side.
Exactly, that's a terrific idea. The university side of the street, there's nobody walking over there, so why not put a bicycle path over there?
But we also wanted to extend all the way down, at least to ours.
Okay, good. I like the idea of extending it up here. We'll see how far that goes, but I like the idea of that big loop. It just means more buses, but
well, the on demand also
takes
might allow you not to have it not that far.
Okay, thanks. All right, who's left?
You, how about me?
Okay, the radical. The radical is going to speak last.
Well, all right, thank you.
He's talking about this map.
He's talking about this map.
Well, a lot of things have been covered and they are wonderful, and I'm just delighted to be here and the most interesting discussions that we have in town. And at our table, the thing that had not been mentioned yet, which I found creative and interesting, was Marina Rubina's suggestion that there could be many more walkable places downtown, that there are many business establishments, restaurants, and one sort or another, where the front is toward town and seen and used, but the back is a totally useless part of the area, which could be developed, and could be developed in two ways. One is creating more space for the establishments, so that instead of having one front and a useless back part, there would be multiple access points and therefore greater opportunities for commercial establishments. And in addition, these back parts could also be combined, as they almost are now, into walkable spaces, where there would be a walkable part, for example, from behind the movie theater towards CBS and other areas, which now go through spaces, partly parking lots, which are totally unused. And I found that very creative and something that has, on the whole, not been discussed before. So that was really the part that was new. The other part, which is my own hobby horse, is it may not happen soon, and it's a question of time, but eventually cars have to be eliminated from the downtown area. And the main problem there is to have a circulation system, a public transportation circulation system that is really usable. You know, we have the buses that we at least had, I don't know what that it is right now, but they came so rarely and they were so underused as a result that they were really not very useful. If there's a public transportation system, and a free one, and that's been talked about, and one that is really so frequent that you don't have to stand there for a long time, it has to be the main thing. It has to be so that people are driven to that, because if they can, in addition, also use the cars and thereby make the downtown and the rest of the town perhaps clogged and unusable, then that doesn't work. There has to be a transportation system that really works with frequency and access that can replace cars. I think that's something for the future,
can I ask a question? Because when you and Tony were talking about this before, it wasn't clear that you were talking about the same thing. Are you talking about not only getting rid of personal, private automobiles, but all automobiles, including the kind of on-demand service that Tony talked about? Because they're very different. I mean, if you want to get rid of even the on-demand, it creates a wonderful pedestrian and biking environment, but I think it's less feasible.
Well, it's not up to me to decide. These are obviously options. The whole thing is something for the future, because I think in the near future that isn't too likely to happen. But it is something to think about, and I think both options are possible. My own feeling was that the public access transportation would still exist, but there would be space for it. There would be no delays resulting from the private cars that clog the system right now.
Okay, we have one more before.
Can I add something from this table?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, just two things that haven't been discussed. I mean, one, we had regional intercepts, one at 206, either at the shopping center or actually out at 206 and Ewing. And the other would be out at Alexandria and Route 1. With another thing we didn't discuss is whether the Dinky to Princeton Junction corridor should be used in a more effective way, either as dedicated bus lane or something of that sort. Yep. And the other thing, which just is personal, which I think is the elephant in the room we haven't discussed, is to me this whole loop, bus loop, which is central to this plan, only makes sense if there's the political will to channel mixed use housing with affordable housing at nodal points around that loop, like at where the old Valley Road School is, and on different points of Harrison Street.
Oh, yeah. You know, that's been proven all the way back to the San Francisco way back when in transit-oriented development. Now we're starting to talk about transit-oriented development being a little bit old hat. Now they're talking about transit-dependent development. It's oriented to be, maybe you do it, maybe you don't. But if you have to start to think about transit-dependent development, then you're talking about reduction of parking, but the transit system has to be in place, or you ask the developers, when we look at susceptibility to change now, and we put susceptibility to change on top of these maps in terms of where they want the stops, you say to the developer, yeah, hey, listen, we need $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 for a stop. We need it and give you some subsidies to blah, 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 make it happen. So, I mean, there's all sorts of interesting negotiation pieces.
Yeah, I just want to not start this conversation today, but I do want to invite people to reach out to their thoughts, with their thoughts about it, which is, today has been super focused on the center of town. Yeah. And one of the things that I've been interested in is trying to create walkable nodes that would serve folks who live in the periphery. Right. So, you know, we've already established an overlay down towards Cherry Valley and 206 for mixed-use development, to try to encourage mixed-use development there, so that there could be some commercial that would support the residential that's already at Griggs Farm. But we have a new affordable housing development that's happening down on Harrington Road there. There are other locations around town where we could have new nodes, mixed-use residential, that would also provide opportunities for residents who are now totally suburban, right, to be able to walk to nearby locations. And I want people to give me their feedback on if you have good locations you think where that can happen. You know, in the Riverside neighborhood, I don't know where, you know, on 206 South as you head out of town, things like that.
Let's finish the synthesis on this and then we'll get
I'm sorry, I thought
okay, we got one more and then we're gonna be right on time, I think, yes.
I think I'll talk about the thing that we all agree on, which we're excited about the mixed-use parking, and so we went wild with a plethora of purple rectangles, and so that's something we could all agree on. But something I thought was important, what I see every morning is, I must have done something. What I see every morning.
No, it's probably the battery is
The
gone.
battery died.
Okay. Sorry, you got to talk. You got her.
What I see every morning is a dangerous 12-year-olds trying to bicycle across Nassau Street, across Harrison Street to get to the middle school. There are a lot of families who over in Little Brook Riverside who want their kids to bicycle safely to the high school. It's a fine distance, not more than 2 miles. But those moms say their prayers every morning knowing their kids are crossing dangerous streets, and there's no good way to do it. And so that, to me, that's the priority for, I put a bunch of blue noodles over there just kind of randomly saying we need to be able to address those family needs, and they're not represented here in this meeting. So one example, my suggestion to Emma was there should be a dedicated meeting to target those people and hear their voices about what their needs are so that their kids can become bicyclists and get to school safely. And they don't have to say their prayers every morning. Hope. Yeah.
All right.
I want to add two things.
Sure, okay.
So first, I'm a European. I really think that you spoke about Toulouse.
I'm sorry.
But you can speak about German cities or Dutch cities.
Yeah.
I mean, we should not be scared about having an entire island that's completely just pedestrian around Palmer Square. Why do we have cars in Palmer Square, honestly? So Hellfish, Witherspoon, I mean, really, we should expand that area. The other thing is there should be public transportation to cover. We always speak about the downtown. I don't understand. This is not representing the entire municipality. What about these people? What about all these people?
Yep.
We really need to make sure that when we think about public transportation, we include these people. So there should be a bus loop that goes there. And I agree, there must be a loop that goes in the Riverside area.
Okay. Great ideas. To repeat myself, it is always extraordinary in these workshops what we find. You get ideas which are consistent, some people, but you also get ideas that you could never have imagined before. And ideas that come because you guys know this town, you know it really well, you've got really strong ideas about what it should be. But this morning, it was an extraordinary success with the people who are here who seem to be really dedicated to this. We got some great ideas. Now what we'll do is we'll synthesize it. We'll go back to David or whomever, whenever we do synthesize the stuff again. But from kind of Princeton Future's point of view, you guys have been remarkable. We've got some extraordinarily interesting data, and I hope that this will be used in the context of the future master plan. But great ideas, and I thank you all for spending your time here because it's an invaluable contribution to setting this network up. So again, thank you all very much for